Ano Badra Kritavo Yantu Vishwataha. This is a Vedic mantra often quoted by the scholars. Let noble thoughts come to me from all directions. Are you wondering why I am saying this? Because the lesson we are going to learn is about Vedic culture. Dear students, welcome to this session on Vedic culture. Dear students, in the previous chapter, Indus Valley Civilization, you have studied amazing archaeological facts. In the end of the discussion, you must have listed the causes for the decline of Indus civilization. They include ecological imbalance caused by the deforestation, earthquakes, massive floods, drying up of river Saraswati or drift in the course of river Indus, all this. And in the end, very important cause, that was Aryan invasion. Is it really Aryans who destroyed the Indus civilization? This is a debatable question. Let's not go into that debate. Let's focus on Aryan invasion. Now, you must have really confused what is the connection between the Aryans and the topic Vedic culture. Yes, there is a connection. The Aryans evolved a very distinct culture called as Vedic culture. Hence, you need to understand the fact that the Aryans are the Vedic people. The Vedic people are Aryans. The Aryans established Vedic culture after the Indus civilization in the Indian subcontinent, or in the sense, the Aryans established Vedic culture on the ruins of Indus civilization. Now, the question arises to our mind is, where do they come from? The Aryans come to Indian subcontinent from the northwestern direction in 2000 BCE. Aryans came to Indian subcontinent in 2000 BCE. This is an important fact that you need to keep in mind. The Aryans migrated to India in several waves. Aryan migration to India did not happen at a stroke. It happened in several waves, and it was believed that initially 5 Aryan tribes migrated into India. Rigveda refer them as Panchajanas. Here Panchajana means, in Sanskrit, Pancha means 5. Jana means the tribe. So Aryans were the tribal people, and they came in waves. They came in groups. And it is also believed that Aryan migration to India began in 2000 BCE. By 1500 BCE, the Aryans settled down in India. So they become the inhabitants of India by 1500 BCE. Now let's discuss what are the sources for the study of Vedic culture. The main source for the study of Vedic culture is Vedic literature itself. Vedic literature is the main source for the study of Vedic culture. The early Aryans, or the Vedic people, have not left behind any archaeological evidences. So whatever the information that we have about this people are from the Vedic literature. Fortunately, Aryans have left behind a rich Vedic literature. In the meantime, we will concentrate on a question: which was the original home of the Aryans, and why did they come to India? Why did they come to India? Original home. Original home means the first place of inhabitation. So which was the first place of inhabitation? On this issue, there are a number of theories. The theories like Arctic region was the original home of the Aryans as claimed by Balagangadhar Tilak. And Swami Dayananda Saraswati says the original home of the Aryans was Tibet, and Max Muller, very renowned linguist of Germany, claims that the original home of the Aryans was Central Asia. And many theories are there, but we don't need to go and discuss all of them. But let's take one version, which was the original home of the Aryans. There is no unanimous opinion, or there is no consensus of opinion among the scholars regarding the original home of the Aryans. It was believed that the Aryans were original inhabitants of Caspian Sea region in Central Asia. So their original inhabitants, as per our textbook, Caspian Sea region. Caspian Sea region in Central Asia. Central Asia was the original home of the Aryans according to our textbook. This was the view of Max Muller. They migrated into Indian subcontinent in search of pastures. They migrated to Indian subcontinent in search of pastures. This is because the Aryans were basically pastoral nomads. They were pastoral nomads. Nomad means, you know, the people who don't lead a sedentary life, they move from place to place. So Aryans were pastoral nomads, so they were living by cattle rearing. Cattle rearing was their life. So therefore, they were always in search of pastures for the cattle whom they keep. So they used to migrate from place to place. So it is interesting to note that the Aryan migration to India was not a cakewalk. It was not an easy affair. They had to face the resistance of the natives. The natives of India are referred in Rigveda as Dasas. Dasas. Or they are referred as Dasyus. Dasyus. This is how the natives of India referred in Rigveda. So the natives, Dasas or Dasyus, offered a stiff resistance to the Aryans. In the end, Aryans subdued these Dasas, and they were just got vanquished from the north, and the Dasas were forced to settle down in the south. Today we identify them as Dravidians. So by all this discussion, what we can understand is that Aryans settled down in the northwestern part of India. That region was referred in Rigveda as Sapta Sindhu. Sapta Sindhu. Sapta Sindhu region. So that place was referred as Sapta Sindhu region. Sapta Sindhu region means is a place of Sindhu and its 7 tributaries were flowing. So the 7 tributaries are Ravi, Chenab, Sutlej, Beas, Jhelum, Drishadwati and Saraswati. These are the 7 tributaries of river Indus, and this region is together called as Sapta Sindhu in Rigveda, and which is the present day Punjab both in India and Pakistan. This region is called Sapta Sindhu regions. So we should make it very clear that the Aryans at first settled down in Sapta Sindhu region, and this happened by the time span of 2000 BCE to 1500 BCE. By this time span, the Aryans settled down in the Sapta Sindhu region. Then after 1500 BCE, the Aryan migration to the eastward has commenced. In the eastward, they first settled down in the Ganga, Yamuna, Doab region, and afterwards they migrated further in eastward and spreading to the areas of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and the areas of Bihar. Likewise, Aryan migration happened. So in the first place of Aryan settlement in India was Sapta Sindhu region. So that we should remember. Now let us concentrate on two terms which frequently comes in our discussion on in this topic. That is the two terms Arya and Veda. So let us for a while, let's focus on these two terms. The term Aryan is most referred word in Rigveda. It means noble. The term Aryan means noble, master, a person dependent on agriculture, or a person of a high born, or an honorable person. These are all the meanings that we can attribute to the term Aryan. Aryans were quite different from the Dravidians, and they were fair in complexion and had well-built body. They were fair in complexion and had well-built body. They had a good height, long nose, high forehead. These are all the physical description of the term Aryan. So they were simply a class apart from the other people. They were simply class apart. The next term that we look into is Veda. Vedas are the sacred books of Aryans. Vedas are the sacred books of the Aryans. They were the main source for the study of Vedic culture. They were the main source for the study of Vedic culture. The Vedas are derived from the Sanskrit word Vid. The term Veda is derived from the Sanskrit word Vid, which means knowledge. Which means knowledge. We can also say Janna. Knowledge or Janna is the meaning of term Veda. Some people believe Vedas are of divine origin. They call Vedas as Apaurusheya and Nitya. Apaurusheya means not created by man. Not created by man. And Nitya. Nitya means eternal, which is going to last, which is going to exist forever. So that is why even today the Vedic literature is relevant. The knowledge, the science of Veda holds good to the present time also. The Aryans at first composed 4 Vedas. The first Veda to be composed was Rigveda. Rigveda was the first Veda to be composed, and it was believed by 2000 BCE it was obtained from the god by 2000 BC, and by 1500 BC Rigveda must have been composed. It was written down in 1500 BCE, and it was from 1500 BCE to 1000 BCE, only Rigveda existed. This period we call it as early Vedic period or Rigvedic period. So time span is most probably 500 years. The remaining 3 Vedas, that is Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharva Veda, were composed much later, and which is called as later Vedic period. The time span of the other Vedas, that is from 1000 BCE to 500 BCE. This is the time span of Vedic period. So other 4 Vedas are Yajurveda, Samaveda and Atharva Veda. These are the 4 Vedas. So these 4 Vedas, these were the 4 Vedas which are held very important among the Vedic literature. Vedic literatures are vast, and for your reference I'll tell you the different kinds of Vedic literature. The first set of Vedic literature are called Vedas. They are 4 in number. Second set is called as Brahmanas. They were commentaries written on 4 Vedas. The third one is Aranyakas and Upanishads. Aranyakas are meant to be the books which is forest. This is also called as the forest books, the books which is meant to be read in the life Vanaprastha stage. The next one is Upanishads. Upanishads are purely philosophical works. These are the major set of Vedic literature. Vedic literatures are much. There are many. They are like Vedanga, Upaveda, Darshanas, Dharmashastras, Puranas, and also epics like Ramayana, Mahabharata. They all form Vedic literature. They are all together called as Vedic literature, but the most significant of them is called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda. So all the knowledge and all the points that we discuss here are from the Vedas. So Vedas are very significant as far as our knowledge about Vedic culture is concerned. So I hope that you have understood all the facts that I discussed so far. The first one that you need to keep in mind is arrival of Aryans took place in 2000 BCE, and the main source for our study of Aryan culture is Vedic literature. The original home of the Aryans, probably the Central Asian region, and that is especially the Caspian Sea region. The Aryans, as they migrate into India, they have to face the resistance of the Dasas or the native people, and they were defeated by the Aryans, and Aryans occupied their land and they settled down in a region called Sapta Sindhu. Sapta Sindhu means an area where Indus and its 7 tributaries flows. Next thing that we learned is about the term Arya. Arya means noble or master and an honorable person, and that is what. Next thing that we learned is Veda. Veda means it is derived from the Sanskrit word vid, and which means knowledge, Janna, and Vedas are 4 in number. They are called Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda. Now, the students, now we'll focus on the salient features of Vedic culture. So in that, first we will discuss political conditions. Salient features of Vedic culture, which means important aspects of Vedic life. In that, first point that we'll be discussing is the political conditions. I made it very clear to you, Aryans live in tribes. The Aryan tribes first settled down in the Sapta Sindhu region and gradually moved in the eastward direction. And the Aryan tribes were called as Jannas. The Aryan tribes were called as Jannas. The Aryan tribes were headed by Rajan. Rajan heads the Aryan tribe. The Rajan we just can't say that king. He was a elected person or a selected person, and his position was not hereditary. So the Vedic tribe is called as Janna, which is ruled or headed by Rajan, who is not a hereditary person, who is elected by the Janna. So that is what the Rajan is. Rajan was assisted in administration by officials like Purohita, Sangrahatri, Senapati, Vishpati, and Gramini. These were the officials of Rajan. Rajan was helped in day-to-day administration by these people. Purohita, who was a priest who looked after the religious affairs of the king or Rajan. Sangrahatri, who seems to be the collector, tax collector, but there was no such tax collecting system existed during the later early Vedic time, but he seems to be a tax collector. Next one is Senapati, who looked after the military and the cattle raid and such things. Next one was Vishpati and Gramini. Let's discuss these two parts. Grama was the most Grama was the smallest unit of administration, and it was administered by Gramini. Grama was administered by Gramini. And above the Grama is the next political unit, that is called group of villages or cluster of villages, and it was looked after by Vispati. Vispati looked after the administration of Vis. And above the Vis is Janna, which is ruled by Rajan. This is what the political setup of early Vedic times. Janna, Vis, Grama. Janna, Vis, Grama are the political units, and they were ruled by Rajan, Vispati and Gramini. This is the political setups and institutions of early Vedic period. The primary duty of the Rajan was the protection of his tribe and the cattle. That was the primary responsibility of the Rajan. Protection of the tribe, that is Janna, and the cattle. That was a responsibility of Rajan. So Rajan used to protect his people and the tribe. People, in a sense of thanksgiving, used to offer him voluntary gifts. That voluntary gifts offered by the people to the Rajan was called Bali. That was called Bali. Bali was a voluntary gifts submitted by the early Vedic people to the Rajan, which may be called in the later Vedic times as a tax. But in the early Vedic period, it was not at all tax. It's as a token of respect, as a mark of thanksgiving, the people submitted voluntary gift to the Rajan, that is called Bali. That was in a taxation system, was in its initial stages by the Rigvedic times. Now the very important part is Vedic Assemblies. Vedic Assemblies. In Rigveda, there are mentions of words like Sabha, Samiti, Vidata and Gana. These were all identified by the scholars as political institutions. But most frequently found political names of political institutions are two, that is called Sabha and Samiti. Sabha and Samiti. Here, Sabha means group of elders and Samiti means group of experts. Group of elders, group of experts. Group of elders offered Rajan their views on their experience of life. And Samiti, which seems to be a powerful body, which comprised of experts, and they gave the Rajan expert views. So these are the two political institutions of early Vedic time which assisted the king in discharging his day-to-day administrative functions. So keep in mind, early Vedic assemblies are two. They are Sabha and Samiti. This is an important point to remember. So these are all the political institutions, the political powers of the early Vedic times. Dear students, throughout our discussions, we will be discussing what was the condition of early Vedic time and what has changed during the later Vedic time. We will be comparing. Now let's see how the political conditions had changed by the later Vedic period. We will see. During the later Vedic period, Jannas become powerful and turned into kingdoms. Jannas become powerful and turned into kingdoms. The kingdoms were divided and subdivided into Gopa, Vishaya and Grama. Look, this is what the So during the later Vedic period, the new political institutions came into existence, that is called Gopa, Vishaya and Grama. More or less the same but the powers and functions of these political institutions must have changed. And the kingship, which was not hereditary in the case of early Vedic period, now it has become hereditary. So very important part is this: kingship become hereditary. Kingship became hereditary. Hereditary kingship emerged during the later Vedic times. Some important kingdoms emerged. They are Kuru, Panchala, Videha, Kashi, Vidarbha, etc. are the important kingdoms emerged in the later Vedic times. Interestingly, hierarchy of kings also came into existence during the later Vedic times. Earlier, only the king existed, who was called Rajan, but there was no hierarchy, no grading or no ranking. But during the later Vedic period, the kings used to be called with different titles: Raja, Maharaja, Rajadiraja, Raja, Ekrat, Virat, Samrat, Chakravarti. These were all the different hierarchies of the kings. That is like Raja, Maharaja, Rajadiraja, Ekrat, Virat, Samrat, Chakravarti. These were all the titles used by the later Vedic kings. Then the kings are always concerned about increasing their prestige, their political supremacy. For the purpose, the kings began to perform yagas and like Rajasuya, Ashwamedha and Vajapeya. So these were performed. Ashwamedha, Rajasuya, Vajapeya were performed during the later Vedic times. By conducting these yajnas or yagas, kings' political prestige had gone up and their political supremacy increased, and kings emerged as imperial powers. The kings were assisted by council of ministers. This is one more change that we can see during the later Vedic times, is council of ministers. Council of ministers. A new system called council of ministers. During the early Vedic times, you can't find any council of ministers, but by the later Vedic times, you have council of ministers who assisted the king in running the day-to-day administration. And officials continue to exist. Sabha Samiti also continue to exist, but it seems that they have lost their power considerably, but they did existed. A new kind of system emerged during the later Vedic time was military. During early Vedic time, military existed, but it was not given so much of importance. But during the later Vedic times, military was well organized. It consists of infantry, elephant force, cavalry. These are the important components of the military of later Vedic time. Navy did exist, but it was in very little use. Navy existed, but it was in very little use. Warfare became a complicated affair during the later Vedic times. Simple weapons of early Vedic period were replaced during the later Vedic period by bows and arrow, swords, maces, spears, etc. During the war or while fighting war, the soldiers used to wear helmets and armors for protection. So they knew the use of helmets and armors for protection. Winning the war became a very important thing for all the kings. For the purpose, they went to the extent of or to the path of deceit, treachery. So ultimately, by hook or crook, the Vedic kings wanted to win the war. So for the purpose, they even went to the extent of deceit. So by this heading, political conditions, we have seen what was the political conditions of the early Vedic period and how it got changed during the later Vedic period. Let's try to recollect once again. During the early Vedic times, the biggest political institution was Janna. It is the tribe itself. It has no specific confined territory. Next unit is Vis. It's a group of villages. The next unit is the Grama. It is the smallest unit of administration. Janna was looked after by Rajan, who is elected by the tribe, and the next unit Vis is appointed by the Rajan, who is called Vispati, and the lowest administrative body Grama, which was looked after by Gramini. And king was assisted in his administration by Purohita, Sangrahatri, Senapati, Vishpati and Gramini. And Bali was a kind of voluntary tax or a gift offered to the king by the people. Then Sabha Samiti are the two assemblies of early Vedic time that helped the king in running the administration. But during the later Vedic period, a lot has changed in the political setup. New political institutions like Gopa, Vishaya, Grama came into existence. Kingship has become hereditary. Here kings used to be elected, but here kingship has become hereditary. And kings assumed the hierarchy in their order like Raja, Maharaja, Rajadiraja, Ekrat, Virat, Samrat likewise. To increase their prestige and to have the political supremacy over the other king, they used to perform yagas, that is like Ashwamedha, Rajasuya, Vajapeya likewise. And Sabha Samiti continued to exist, but the new addition to the later Vedic period was Council of Ministers, along with the officials of early Vedic period. The warfare became complicated during the later Vedic period, and simple weapons were replaced by modern weapons during the later Vedic period. So I hope that you have understood the basic parts of the Vedic culture and the political conditions of Vedic period. With this, I conclude my first session on Vedic culture. In the next session, we will discuss the remaining aspects of Vedic culture. Thank you.